We're starting a new chapter now in our Learning AutoCAD course, and we're going to be looking at creating and drawing some simple geometry. So we've got a new drawing for you. It's called geometry.dwg, and as usual you can download it from the library to follow along with the video. So when you open up geometry.dwg, you'll see this rectangle on the screen. And the first thing we're going to look at is OSnap, object snaps, and OTrack, object snap tracking. Now these tools are available to you on the status bar at the bottom of the screen. Now we've already covered the interface, so we know where the status bar is. It's down here. And we need to look at these two icons first. So you want to make sure that object snap tracking is on. It should be blue like that. And then we're going to look at our object snaps here. And you can see that my object snaps are also on. It's blue. But you want to make sure by clicking on this little fly out arrow here, you've got the right object snaps switched on. These are your running object snaps. So basically they're the ones that will appear all the time while you're drafting and creating your designs in AutoCAD. So you can see there's 5 ticked there. You've got endpoint, midpoint, center, an intersection, and extension. Now, if I come down here to Object Snap Settings and click there, it'll open up the dialog box in the Object Snap tab. So there's our Drafting Settings dialog box, Object Snap tab. You can see Object Snap is on, Object Snap Tracking is on, and there's my 5 object snaps, my running object snaps switched on. So make sure it looks like that. You might need to go to the dialog box if you're using older versions of AutoCAD too. So make sure your dialog box looks like that and then click on OK. So that's our OSnap and OTrack settings switched on. Let's do a little bit of drafting with that and see how it works. So I'm going to utilize the line command, which is on the draw panel on the home tab on the ribbon. So I'm going to click on the line command, come into the drawing area, and it's prompting me for my first point. Now what I'm going to do is hover over this midpoint snap. You see the midpoint appear there? Do not click, just hover. And then we're going to come up here to the midpoint on this side here of the rectangle. And again, you'll see the midpoint snap appear, just hover. Now as I come down, you'll see this green dashed line kick in. It's your polar tracking. And that's down there on the status bar too. It looks like a little pie with a section cut out of it. And I've deliberately left that on because you can see now with the polar tracking and combined with the object snap tracking, I get an intersection of those 2 green dashed lines. When I left click now, you'll see that my line starts exactly where those 2 polar tracking lines intersect. That's because I had the object snap tracking on, but also down here, can you see my polar tracking was on? That one there. So make sure that polar tracking is on as well if you weren't successful getting that line to start in the middle. So what we'll do now is we'll take this across, and again the polar tracking kicks in. Can you see 0 degrees there? And I'll just drag that and you'll see that I get a midpoint snap. When you get the midpoint snap appear, just left click once and there's the second point of your line. Press enter or right click and enter like that on the contextual menu to finish. So you've drawn your line there using object snap tracking and a midpoint object snap. Polar tracking had a bit of a hand in it too. Now, what about regular object snaps? How do they work? Well, let's have a look at that. Let's see how they work. So I go to the line command again, come into the drawing area. If I just hover there, I've got an endpoint snap. I just left click to accept it, and my line starts from the endpoint. Go to the endpoint here, left click again, like so. And I can keep going ad nauseum creating lines using my object snaps or freehand if I want to. If I come down here though, and I click there, I've placed another line. Now that line, I might not have wanted it there. I can right click, and on the context sensitive shortcut menu, you can see that I can click on undo, and that'll undo the last line segment in this particular instance of the line command. So if I've drawn a line segment while I'm drawing some line segments in the line command, and I draw the wrong line segment, it's a right click and undo. I'll just take that back to where we were before. There's the endpoint snap, left click, and either enter on the keyboard or right click and then enter on the shortcut menu. So you can see there how quick and easy it is to draw lines using your object snaps, using your object snap tracking. What I'm going to do now is select each of these lines, get the crosshair on each one, like so. And I'm going to hit the delete key on the keyboard and delete them. There's another snap that is really, really useful in AutoCAD, and it's called geometric center. So if I now go to the line command, come into the drawing area and perform a shift and a right click, that brings up my override snaps, my snap overrides. And what I can do there is I can go to geometric center, which is not switched on in the object snaps. And just when I hover, can you see there's the geometric center there of that rectangle? When I left click, my line starts there like that. So I don't have to do the object snap tracking if it's a nice regular shape. I can then come to here, there's the midpoint, right click, enter to finish the line. Another little trick as well, if you press enter or the space bar, it'll repeat the last command that you did. So now I'm back in the line command, I can quickly draw my other two lines, like that, back to there, enter to finish, and there we go. Quick and easy. Just a different workflow or process using a different object snap to get the same end result. So utilize your object snaps, your object snap tracking, and your snap overrides to create the designs that you need in your AutoCAD drawings. We're staying in our geometry.dwg file, and you can see I've left it in the same state as it was at the end of the last video. We're going to now look at polar and ortho on the status bar in the geometry.dwg file. First of all, what we're going to do, we're going to select the lines that we created previously. Just simply get the crosshair over each one, click on it. You can press the delete key on the keyboard, or you can right click and erase on the shortcut menu. So we're back to our nice clean rectangle that we started with in the previous video. Now we're going to go down to the status bar. We're going to come down here to polar. Polar should be on already. It's normally on by default. It's that one there. So if it's grey like that, click on it so it's blue so that it's on. And you can see on the command line there, it's now telling me that polar is on. So if I click here on the flyout now, it will tell me the angle that polar is set to. I'm going to set it to 45-degree angle increments by clicking on 45, like so. Now, before we go any further, also make sure that your object snap tracking here is on and your object snaps are on. Check your object snaps like we did previously. Make sure you've got those 5 object snaps: endpoint, midpoint, center, intersection, and extension switched on. Then just click in the drawing once to lose the object snap menu. We're going to use the line command again. So home tab on the ribbon, draw panel, and click on the line command like so. And I come into the drawing area. It's asking for the first point of my line. I'm going to hover here and click on the endpoint snap there. So left click, and my line starts like so. Now, as I drag the mouse, can you see when I hit 45 degrees, I get the green dashed polar tracking line. And it's telling me there, can you see 45 degrees on the dynamic input, and the actual angle I'm working at is 315 degrees, you can see there. Now, I've also got my object snap tracking on. So if I now just hover over this midpoint here on this vertical side of the rectangle, and then just drag out slightly, watch what happens. As I hit that 45-degree line, can you see the polar tracking kicks in, and I also get an intersection there. So I now know that that 45-degree line comes down on that second end of the line directly opposite the midpoint showing there on the left on the vertical side of the rectangle. So I can left click and I know that that's exactly at 45 degrees. You can see now as I follow the 45-degree line down again on the polar tracking, this time you can see it's kicking in, and as I come down I don't need to worry because I can just come down to that end point and I know it's at 45 degrees. Can you see that now? I'm following it down, and then when I hit the end point I just left click and then enter to finish, and I know that both of those two lines are at 45 degrees. That's the polar tracking kicking in and the object snap tracking kicking in. Let's have a look now at the ortho setting in AutoCAD, orthogonal. And what that means is it's tying you down to the X and Y axes in your AutoCAD drawings. Now, one of the things that you'll notice is when I come down here to the status bar and switch on ortho, known as ortho mode, and as you can see there, it says restrict cursor orthogonally, which is very difficult to say when you're recording videos. You'll notice polar turns off. You cannot have polar and ortho on at the same time. It's one or the other. So let's draw some lines now with ortho switched on. I'll go back to the line command. I'm going to go to this midpoint snap here, left click. Now as I come across, when I go up and down, can you see I can only go horizontally or vertically? So at the moment, I can't really go anywhere. But if I go from that original point, can you see I can come vertically down? So I'm just going to come all the way across like so. And when I get to that midpoint there, left click and enter to finish. So you can see that Ortho will give you an exact horizontal or vertical line. Talking of vertical, let's repeat that. Let's go back to the line command. I'll go to this midpoint now. And as I come down, you'll notice I'm moving the crosshair. Can you see I can only go vertically or horizontally? So I come vertically down, hit the midpoint there, left click, enter to finish, and I don't even need my object snaps on to get those midpoints because I know that they are orthogonal lines. They're vertical or horizontal and they're true. They're going to be exactly horizontal or exactly vertical. I'm just utilizing the object snaps there for a visual purpose so that I can see where I'm going in the video. But you would not need your object snaps on if you've got orthogonal or ortho switched on as well. So as you can see there, you've got different ways of placing lines and objects at different angles as you start creating the geometry in your AutoCAD drawings. Once again, we're staying in our geometry.dwg file, and as you can see, I've left it in the same state as it was at the end of the last video. Now, just before we get started on lines, arcs and circles, we need to do a little bit of housekeeping on our drafting settings down on the status bar. We need to make sure that our polar tracking is back on here and not ortho. Also, make sure that your object snap tracking and object snaps are on as well. I always leave those on religiously unless I don't need them. Okay, always leave them on because they're always useful, and more importantly, it makes sure that you're drafting accurately to known angles and object snaps. So, as I mentioned, we're going to look at lines, arcs and circles. So we're going to stay in the Home tab on the ribbon, and I'm going to go to the Draw panel, and I'm going to utilize the Line command. I click on the Line command and I come into the drawing area. Now, let's look at the Line command in a bit more detail. The first prompt is the first point of your line. Now you'll notice in the dynamic input there, next to the crosshair, I can specify a coordinate. I can also specify a distance and an angle. If you've got dynamic input switched on, which you should have by default anyway, it will also, as you draw the line, display all the variables, the angle, the distance, and so on as well. So let's do that. Using my object snaps now, I'm going to come down here and you can see I get an endpoint snap there like so. You might get a midpoint snap as well. Depends on where you position your crosshair. So there's my line starting there. Now, because I've got the polar tracking set to 45 degrees, can you see that? I can draw a line at 45 degrees. But what I love about the line command now, all of that information on the crosshair, 45 degrees, the length of the line from the start point to the crosshair, and the polar angle as well. Now I'm just going to use a regular object snap. I'm going to come up here. There's my midpoint or possibly endpoint snap there. Depends on where you position the crosshair. Doesn't matter which snap you use, midpoint or endpoint. Left click, and there we go. Enter to finish. We've drawn a line. We've put the 2 points of our line on the drawing, utilizing our object snaps, and they're in place. Now you can draw a line slightly differently. So let's press spacebar or enter to repeat the line command. It's asking for the first point again. I'm going to start where I started before, here, like so. So there's the endpoint, left click, and my line kicks in like so. Now I'm going to deliberately take my line over here somewhere, like that. And I've just moved the mouse to do that. And what I'm going to type in now is a coordinate. Now the coordinate I'm going to type is 300, 300. So that's 300 to the right along the x-axis, and 300 upwards on the y-axis because they're both positive values, and positive denotes a specific direction in AutoCAD. Now, I just simply type it in. So I just type 300 like so, and then comma, and it automatically knows that I'm putting a coordinate in as soon as I hit that comma key, and it locks that 300 in the x direction. So let's do 300 again in the y direction, and I can just tab between those two values and they then both lock like so, 300, 300, like that. When I press enter, you'll see that line has gone 300 along this way to the right and 300 up. And I'm now here. Can you see? My next line segment is waiting to automatically start. Now, I might not want that 300, 300 line segment. So like we've done previously, it's just a right click and on the shortcut menu, undo. And there you go. We're back to the start point again. I'm just going to hit escape now a couple of times just to lose the line command. Now, when you hit escape in AutoCAD, the first escape will normally cancel the command. The second escape will also deselect any objects you might have selected. So always use escape twice if you're coming out of a command. So let's have a look now at the arcs in AutoCAD. Again, they're on the draw panel here, like so. Click on the flyout underneath the word arc, and you can see there's lots of different arcs available. I'm not going to go through all of them. I'm going to use one of them. But remember the counterclockwise rule. All arcs in AutoCAD, their positive direction is going counterclockwise around their center point. Always remember that one. So start, center, end is the arc I'm going to use. Start point of my arc, I'm going to use this endpoint snap here, left click. Center is there, left click. Coming out this way, I simply go there. Can you see it's following that counterclockwise rule? Left click again, and there's my arc. Start, center, end. And then what I'll do again is press spacebar or enter to start a new arc command. Would I do that though? You've got to be careful there because it won't repeat the exact same arc command. You've got to be careful and make sure that you want your start, center, end. So my suggestion here, maybe don't use the spacebar or enter, but go back to the arc command and pick the one you need. Because you might have been using a different one, it might default to a different one. Just be aware of that one. So start point of my arc this time, starting here, center is there, end point is there. 3 clicks, and there's my second arc just there, like so. So you can see that there's lots of different ways of drawing arcs, and you can go and investigate those as you start to become more proficient with AutoCAD. Last but not least, the circles, again on the draw panel. Click on the flyout, lots of different circles. You've got center point and a radius, center point and a diameter. You've also got the 2-point circle, where you specify 2 points on a diameter, 3 points, where you specify a diameter and subsequently a radius. You've then got tangent, tangent, radius, and tangent, tangent, tangent. So lots of different ways of drawing circles that you can utilize when you're creating your designs in AutoCAD. I'm going to go for the default, which is center radius. I'm going to use this intersection here, which will show as a midpoint, left click, and there's the center of my circle. And it's asking me now for a radius value. I'm going to pop in there 250 and just press enter. And there's my circle with a radius of 250 units. And that's how quick and easy it is to draw a circle in AutoCAD. Now, I've given you some really, really basic lines, arcs, and circles there. I'll leave it up to you to go and investigate how they all work as you start messing around with your designs in AutoCAD and getting more proficient with AutoCAD as you start to experience the different commands and tools available. We're now going to take a look at polylines, polygons, and splines in AutoCAD. And we've got a new drawing to start you off with. It's called polylines.dwg. As usual, you can download it from the library to follow along with the video. Now, just before we get started, a little bit of housekeeping. In the Layers panel, in the Home tab on the ribbon, make sure that you're set to use the Polylines layer as the current drafting layer. So just click on the drop-down, select Polylines, the word, not the color, and it will make Polylines the current drafting layer. Down here on the status bar, just make sure that you've got your polar tracking switched on and your object snap tracking and your object snaps, which are all on. They're all blue, they're all on, ready to go. Now, what we're going to draw first is a polyline. Now, a polyline is a group of line and arc segments joined together to form an individual object. And you'll see what I mean when we finish drawing our polyline. So over to the Draw panel on the Home tab on the ribbon and click on the Polyline icon here. That creates a 2D polyline. And our start point will be the coordinate 300, 300, like so. And then press enter. And that should start you sort of down bottom left like that. Now, we're going to utilize the polar tracking and move vertically upwards with the mouse. There you go. There's the green polar tracking line. And in the distance box there, I'm going to type 500 and press enter. And there's the first side of our polyline. Dragging it horizontally to the right now, like so, making sure the polar tracking is set to 0, as you can see. We're going to type in 1200 and enter, like so. Now, these units are just generic units. They're not metric, they're not imperial. This is to generate the workflow rather than something that is physically a specific size. So as you can see there, we've got two sides of our polyline. We're now going to right-click, and on that shortcut menu, you can see it's contextual. I'm going to select arc, and now I can place an arc segment inside my polyline object. So I'm going to drag vertically downwards and type 500 again, like we did previously with the other side of the polyline, and press enter. And that will now give a diameter of 500 for that arc segment. But you can see it's trying to draw another arc segment. So we right click again and we go back to the line option on the shortcut menu. So now we're drawing a line segment, as you can see. Now, because this is all in one command, I don't even need to worry now about closing out and snapping to that endpoint over on the left on that first part of the polyline. I can simply just right click now, and on the shortcut menu, click on close, and it closes my polyline. Now, the benefit I've got there is that's not 3 lines and an arc. It's actually just one whole closed polyline. Very, very useful. And the thing there is it saves memory on your PC as well, because that's one object, not 4 objects. So stick with polylines when you can. It's great for keeping your file size down. Let's go back to the layer drop down now. We're going to select polygons this time, and we're going to create a polygon in our AutoCAD drawing. Polygon is up on the draw panel, but it's actually hiding up here. Top right, click on the flyout, you've got rectangle or polygon. Select polygon. Come into the drawing area, prompts you for the default number of sides, which is 4. You can also have 3, a triangle, which is the minimum, and it goes up to 1024 sides. I do not know what a 1024-sided polygon is called. You might have to Google that, but I do know that a 12-sided polygon is a dodecahedron. We're going to go for a hexagon, so our number of sides will be 6, like so. Put that in the box and press enter. Now it asks for the center of your polygon, because it assumes that the polygon will reside either inside or outside a circle. So you can have an inscribed polygon or a circumscribed polygon. Now, I want the center of my arc here. So if I just move around a little bit, can you see if I come in there, just hover around the arc, you'll see the various object snaps. They're your running object snaps. And there's the center there. So when the center appears, hover over it and left click. And now we get that option of inscribed or circumscribed for our polygon. I want inscribed, and I'll show you why. Inscribed gives me a vertex. Can you see that? Circumscribed would go to the midpoint of one of the sides of the polygon. So what I can do now is, as I come out now, I will just go to that midpoint there, left click, and there's my polygon nice and neatly placed in my AutoCAD drawing. Again, this is not a specific object. I'm showing you the workflows and the processes for the commands. Back up to the Layers panel, click on the flyout again, and this time we'll select Splines. Now, splines are non-uniform rational B-splines, or NURBs for short. And it's a bit of a weird word, but basically it's all to do with a logarithmic scale creating an irregular curve. I'm not going to bore you with the mathematics of it, but it allows you to create irregular curves. So not arcs or circles, but curves that are controlled by specific points. Contour lines are a prime example on a flat 2D drawing. So make sure you're on the splines layer, first of all. Go to the draw panel and click on the little flyout arrow, and we're just going to pin that open using the pin. There's our splines there. We've got a spline fit and a spline CV. Fit allows you to draw a spline with fit points. CV is control vertices. That's what the CV stands for. Select the CV spline and come into the drawing area. We're going to specify the first point, which is going to be the midpoint on the left-hand side of our polyline. Left click. And then as you come up and down, watch what happens to your spline. As you place each control vertex, which are the points of the triangles, you can see the spline taking shape, like so. So I'm going to work my way just across like this. There's my CVs as I go. Keep going like that. One more, and then I'll come up to here like so. When I get that end point of the hexagon there, just left click and enter to finish. So what you've done there is you've created an irregular curve using those control vertices. If I select that spline now, it will demonstrate all of the control vertices, and they're the little blue grips. So if I click on one and drag it like so, you'll see the curve change shape. And if I go past that, can you see? It doesn't matter which way you go, it just changes the curvature of the spline. Now, there's another triangle over here as well. What this allows me to do is I can change that to a fit spline, which is the other icon on the draw panel. And what happens there is I've now got fit points, and you can see the spline now fits like a dot to dot between those points. If I click on one of those and drag upwards, you'll see it again changes the shape of the spline. Mathematically, you're not having to think about any of the mathematics behind that. I can go back to the triangle, change it back to control vertices, the CV spline, and there's my control vertices back again like so. I'll just hit escape a couple of times now. I'll unpin the draw panel. And what you've done there now is you've worked in an AutoCAD drawing, creating a polyline, a polygon, and a spline. And you can see that those tools can be extremely useful when you're working with your designs in AutoCAD. We're staying in our polylines.dwg file, and you can see I've left it in the same state as it was at the end of the last video. What we're going to have a look at now is zoom and pan and some of the other zoom tools that are available to you. Zoom and pan allow you to navigate your AutoCAD drawings and move around so that you can get to places in your drawings rather than having to try and figure out a way to get there without using zoom and pan. Zoom and pan are fundamental to the navigation of AutoCAD drawings, and one of the simplest ways to zoom and pan is to use your mouse. So using the mouse, I can position the crosshair on a location where I might want to get to. Let's say the intersection of the spline and the polygon there. So I position the crosshair roughly where I want to be, and I roll up on the wheel of the mouse. And as you can see, it zooms me in. I roll back on the wheel of the mouse, and it zooms me out. It's that simple. Also as well, if I zoom in real close and I feel a bit lost, I can simply double click on the wheel of the mouse, and it will zoom to the extents of the visible drawn objects. I can then roll back a couple of notches like so, and I'm back to approximately where I started. I can also hold down the wheel on the mouse and pan. So you'll notice holding down the wheel gives us this little hand symbol, and you can see now with the wheel held down and moving the mouse, I'm panning in the drawing. Very useful if I zoom in close and then perhaps hold down the wheel and pan to display what I want to display in my AutoCAD drawing. Once I've done that, I can double click on the wheel, and that zooms out to the extents, roll back a notch like so on the wheel again, and you can see how quick and easy it is to get around in your AutoCAD drawings using just the mouse. If I right click now, you'll see as well that I've got pan and zoom on the shortcut menu. So click on pan on the shortcut menu, and now you're in permanent real-time pan. So if I hold down the left-hand mouse button and move, I pan, but when I release the mouse button, I'm still in real-time pan. I can right-click and go to real-time zoom. That gives me a little magnifying glass indicating that I'm now zooming rather than panning. Hold down the left-hand mouse button and move up, you zoom in. Hold down the left-hand mouse button and move down, you zoom out. That's real-time zoom. I can right-click again. I can do a 3D orbit if I had a 3D model. I can also perform a zoom window. So I can now just click and drag a window over an area I want to get to, and it zooms me in straight away. I can right-click again, bearing in mind I'm still in real-time zoom, and I can do zoom original, and there's the original view. I can also then right-click and perhaps go to zoom extents, and it performs a zoom extents just like the double click on the wheel of the mouse. I can then right-click and exit real-time zoom, or perhaps real-time pan, if I was still panning. And then I'm back to normal, roll back a couple of notches on the wheel, and you can see I'm back to approximately the original view I was in. So you can see there on the right-hand shortcut menu, you've also got those pan and zoom commands available, which are real-time zoom and real-time pan. Over on the right-hand side of the drawing area, you can see that we've got this little nav bar. Now, the nav bar itself gives you some really cool zoom commands. If you go here, you can see pan is there, and as you come down, the tooltips kind of jump in the way, but there's a little fly out there that you can click on. So I've got zoom extents, zoom window, zoom previous, lots of different zoom commands. I'm not going to bore you with all of them. But if I do a zoom window, it's subtly different to the zoom window in real-time zoom and real-time pan. Because what I do here is I click once, drag the window to where I want it to go, click again. And that will zoom to the extent of that zoom window. I can then go back to the nav bar, click on the flyout here, and utilize zoom previous. That takes me back to the previous view. One of the ones I really like on the nav bar is this one here, which is zoom in. That'll make it twice as big, and then I go back again, and I do a zoom out, and again it halves it, takes me back out again, it zooms me back out again. They kind of cancel each other out, but they're just a handy little one-click fix if I need something to be bigger or perhaps smaller. Now, it may be that you haven't got the nav bar showing on your AutoCAD screen. You need to change your nav bar display variable. So all you've got to do is type. You don't need to click, just NAVBAR, like that. And on the suggestion menu there, can you see you've got nav bar display? If you select that variable, if the nav bar is on, it should be set to 1, and that is normally the default. But if I set that to 0 and press enter, you'll see it disappears, which is maybe what is the case on your screen. So you just type NAVBAR, select navbar display on the suggestion menu there, set it to 1, press enter, and you should have your navbar at the right-hand side of your AutoCAD screen. So as you can see, lots of different ways to zoom, pan, and generally navigate in your AutoCAD drawings. Explore those tools, get used to them. They are the best way to navigate drawings, whether they're simple or complex.